This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live.
Hello and welcome to Monday Twilight Show. I'm Hannah Wilson. Tonight we're going to be discussing school uniforms. So we're going to be looking at the facts and the reasons behind school uniform, what the positives are, what the negatives are, how to police uniforms, and how to get parents involved, or the pluses and minuses of them being involved.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live. Tune in live at ttradio.org, or to join in the conversation, download the Podbean app and search Teachers Talk Radio. Follow the hashtag TTRadio. Tune in, talk it out with Teachers Talk Radio.
Teaching is a rewarding profession, but it comes with its fair share of challenges. That's where ADAPT come in. We're not your typical trade union, but instead a modern, apolitical alternative, offering expert legal, employment and mental health support. Protection without the politics. So what makes ADAPT different? We're always apolitical and independent, specialised solely in supporting individual teachers. Our caseworkers are professionally qualified, ensuring you always get the best advice. Plus, there's 24/7 mental health support. Whether it's a simple contract check or handling serious allegations, ADAPT are here for you. Join the thousands of educators who've chosen ADAPT to protect their careers. Subscribe at adapt.org.uk today. ADAPT. Supporting school staff. Protecting careers.
So tonight I'm going to be discussing uniforms, and back a couple of days ago there was an article published in, I believe it was the Guardian by Andre Spicer, which was entitled "Not Even Bankers Wear Ties and Blazers Anymore, so Why Should School Children?" And I think especially this year, as schools have tried to put their policies in place, there's been a lot of backlash, especially in the news, in terms of parents going and saying my kids are missing school because of their uniform, or they're not in lessons because of their uniform, and it's really hard to kind of manage uniform and get it right, I think. So it's kind of one of those, like, what is the purpose of school uniform? Is there still a place for it? Do we still need it? And what needs to change about it? Does it need to be adapted and move forward at this point? In the article, he talks about that his daughter was given special dispensation to take off a blazer because it was 30-degree heat. She was one of the lucky ones. Other schools were not allowed to. And children were given detentions for taking their blazers off in sweltering heat. Now, I know majority of the schools they have a summer policy that if it's over a certain temperature, that students don't have to wear blazers. We have that at our school, that in summer they don't have to wear their blazers. So I think it very much depends on the school, and it might just be that not necessarily that they weren't told that they couldn't take them off, or that they just needed them on for a certain point, or something like that. So I think majority of the schools are lenient in the respect that they'll let students take them off. But he goes on to say the list of absurd rules about how students will look in British schools is almost endless, with loads of stories on Mumsnet about intent on micromanaging the most minor aspects of children's appearance, when the most only justification is that it's to help them prepare for the real world. But actually that's not what the real world is like. And in fact, only 5% of workforce actually have uniforms in the British workplace. Most places have casual dress, with even 30% saying that they will do it in their pyjamas. I don't think we need students in pyjamas, though. I think that's going a little bit far. But the sale of formal wear attire has declined by 40% in the last 5 years, and obviously a lot of that has to do with COVID. But it is quite interesting. Do we still have a place for school uniform? And do we need to be so strict on it and have so many sanctions with it? That's the interesting thing. I'm being joined by Karis. Can you hear me, Karis?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Oh, you're a little bit quiet.
I'll turn you up.
If you can go just a little bit closer to the microphone.
Yeah. It's also my dulcet tones.
Oh, you're still a little bit quiet.
Give me a minute. Technical difficulties.
Oh, I can't hear you very well. Ah, she's going to try again. So Karis is going to come and join me. She's told me in advance that she's got some interesting opinions on school uniforms, so I'm intrigued to hear what she has to say. But I do agree that the upfront cost of school uniform is extortionary and very expensive, and that's kind of creates like a barrier for education for poorer families. But is that also the aspect in terms of if we allow them to wear their own clothes, that then there's going to be this hierarchy among students with who wears which design labels and which ones, and does that need to be policed? So it is kind of, how do we do it? But uniform policies were increasingly lax, with only in 1987 that it began to change, and it was the catalyst after outlawing corporal punishment. So is this the last bit that is still kind of lingering from that time within it, that actually we need to seek to kind of change this and create a time where there are more guidelines that allow personal expression and choice rather than following one size fits all kind of rules? And we have got the kind of extreme of that we have issues with schools trying to sanction it. For example, I've got an article from earlier this year where there was chaos as hundreds of students were held in detention for wearing the wrong uniform. And a secondary school near Sheffield faced heavy criticism from parents after a number of pupils were held in detentions and taken out of school days for the new term for not wearing the correct school uniform. I kind of do agree. I get the frustration that students shouldn't miss out of lessons for not wearing the correct uniform. But how do we get them to wear the correct uniform if they don't? Karis, are you there now?
I think so. Can you hear me?
Oh, that's better. Yeah.
I had to mess about with my settings, but I'm here now.
So for context, I can wave through the window to Karis because you're opposite my amazing neighbour, who's gladly come on to chat about this. Do you want to give a background into your kind of teaching background?
So I've been teaching for 23 years, which is really disturbing. Obviously did my teacher training in Scotland and then moved to England. I have worked in every setting I think there is imaginable. So I've worked in EBD, I've worked in state, and I currently work in the independent sector. And I've been a head of science, I've taught primary, I've taught every age, everything really, to be honest. Yeah. It's not much to say. I mean, I don't think there's anything I haven't done apart from maybe teach PE.
That's the thing. You've seen every type of uniform going,
Yeah.
and I'm intrigued because you told me you had a very interesting opinion on uniforms. So I'm going to let you start with that, and then we can have a little chat about it.
I don't know, as the older I get, I think I find that I've got very strong views on things, but I find that uniform is a method of control. So I see uniform, so in my 23 years of teaching, I've seen the phasing in of like polo shirts and jumpers, and then the phasing out of that because of the need to control children's behaviour. And uniform is a method or a mechanism in which we can sort of keep children in their place. And I find the whole concept of uniform from a teaching point of view really uncomfortable, that I'm asked to police it. Like I'm told what a child should wear because that will affect their behaviour. And I don't think necessarily that uniform affects behaviour. I think there's a whole host of things that affect behaviour, from class sizes being the number one. And I'm starting to feel more and more that uniform is redundant as well when you look at what the children are asked to wear. So they're wearing ties, most of the time clip-on ties. They will never wear that in their real life in context. So you're not teaching them a skill in that uniform. I suppose to a certain sense, you're teaching them how to be smart, but they're wearing clip-on ties so that you can control the length of their ties. They're wearing skirts that have got labels on them so you can control the length of a girl's skirt. I find that really uncomfortable. And I find do you know what? I genuinely find it incredibly abhorrent that this is the way we've gone with it. It's such a mechanism of control. And if you look at how fashion or humans have changed, since COVID, no workplace tends to have a strict sort of policy of clothing. More people work from home, they wear much more relaxed clothing. If you look at, for example, the city, the financial circuit, they don't wear ties anymore. Yet we expect children from the age of like 7 in the independent sector to be able to wear a tie. I find that really bizarre. And we have this fascination with skirt length that I find it says more about us than it does about children. And I don't think it teaches children how to actually become agents of themselves. It doesn't help them develop personality or individuality. If anything, what we're saying to children is, you must stick to the herd. You must follow our rules, and these are our rules. And it's honestly like quite prison-like by the way it's even going. We've gone right down to the minutiae of what the shoes should look like, and children are not daft. They know exactly which children have money, which children don't have money. They will always circumvent the system. They will always have a cooler backpack or a more expensive shoe. So this idea that we do it to streamline the herd, to make everybody also believe that for example, you go to that school, therefore it's that school identity. That's an utter nonsense. That's not how you develop school identity through uniform. You could do that through sports uniform. You don't necessarily have to do that in a day-to-day uniform. And I think in countries where they have no uniform, sorry Hannah, I'm going on like
no, it's fine. I'm waiting and then I'll.
No, but countries. You look at countries like Germany that have no school uniform. Children know how to dress for the weather. And in this country, if we have a non-school uniform day, it's like the wheels have come off. Society has literally collapsed, and we have men in the staff room, again, which don't get me started on this one, going on about the length of girls' tops. Like that's a thing. Like, just let children wear what they want to wear. But so say, for example, take Germany that have no uniform rules. Children learn from a very young age to wear clothes that are appropriate and also comfortable and for the weather. Here, our children have no concept of what is a warm outfit, because they have no way of expressing their individuality. And I think 23 years, I'm starting to see like it's becoming more and more like a prison state. This idea of how we police children's uniform. And I got into teaching because I loved my subject. I love teaching children. I don't want to spend 20 minutes of a lesson going, tuck your shirt in, wear your blazer. For goodness sake, that's not teaching, that's policing.
I've got to the point where I'm like, right, I'm only going to say it to 3 kids in the corridor, because I just feel otherwise I literally spend all day, or I'm like, I'll tell what 1 kid as a warning because we're meant to do it, and I'm like, I don't want to spend my whole day telling children off for like tucking a shirt in or pulling a skirt down, because a lot of it, as well as with the skirts, I do agree that they need to be a certain length. But I'm like, especially I'm year 10, so the kids in my tutor group, they're all little skinny beans. They've got tiny waists, and so therefore they're wearing small skirts, but they don't have the length on them, and that's not a them issue. That's a manufacturing issue. That's what is in the shops for school skirts, and it's like, yes, it would be nice if they were a little bit longer, but they're going to wear what they're going to wear, and it's damaging the relationship that I'm having with them, having to every day tell them off. But then there isn't anything after that, because I'm not going to put them into tension, because it's a waste of everybody's time. It's not going to solve anything, and it's not going to improve their learning having a longer skirt.
I think it's such a police culture. I find that whole concept of policing what a child wears really uncomfortable. And especially when it comes to girls, maybe it's the feminist in me that says, it says more about the person in the staff room. It says, oh my God, the girls' skirts are really short. And you're thinking, what are you doing looking at the length of girls' skirts? How dare you? Can't you take yourself out of that of a context? That's a child. You shouldn't be looking at the length of their skirt. It should, if it makes you uncomfortable, that says more about you as a person. You should be able to look at that person and see that, recognise that that's a child, and not take it into that sort of like weird pseudo context that people, and I hate this, well, some people tend to go down about how girls dress, and link that dress to behaviour. There's nothing, I just think they're trying to express who they are as individuals.
But there is that aspect of it. I can't remember, I was watching a TV show that was about young girls and kind of harassment around them. And there is a thing that I found really, really shocking, that if you Google boys' school uniform, it just comes up with normal school uniform. It comes with links to websites for school uniform. But if you type in girls' school uniform, it's all Halloween costumes and sexualized costumes and mini dresses and midriffs out and pigtails and links to inappropriate things. And I was like, I found that quite interesting, that the girls' school uniform is this sexualized thing, and actually by forcing them to wear it, we are sexualizing them in telling them and dictating them what to wear.
And also, we're telling them that by saying, "Oh, your skirt's too short," we're also sexualizing. They know what you're saying by saying that to them. They're like, "Oh, right. So you're saying that my skirt is," you're giving them that sort of connotation, that negative connotation out there. And I hate it when particular staff in the staff room say, "Oh, well, the girls' skirts," and you think, do you know what? You need to button it up, because that's a child, and if you're looking at a child's legs, I've got serious issues. I've got safeguarding issues going on here, and it says more about you as a person than it does about that child. And
I think the only reason I'm looking at a kid's skirt is because I've been told to check the lengths. I've been told to look at it, and I feel uncomfortable about that. So I can't imagine how a male kind of tutor would feel, that they have to kind of police it and look at it on a daily basis and say that to students. Like, we're putting ourselves in quite uncomfortable positions by kind of making ourselves kind of check on it.
I find, and I just think that it's purely that it's gotten out of control. And now, I will be honest with you, I am a mother and I have 2 teenage daughters, and I do follow the school rules, and I find myself internally like having this shouting battle. So this morning, both girls tried to leave the house, and their shirts were like one half in, half out, trying to, I don't know what it was, but I know that they're going to get checked on that for school. So I, as a parent, said, well, tuck your shirt in, because you're going to get into trouble when you get to school, so make sure you look smart. And I'm thinking inside my head, go for it, girl. Get that shirt out.
Because when do you wear a shirt actually tucked in? Like, I generally wear shirts out if I'm going to wear a shirt.
I've never tucked in a shirt. And I have never worn a tie, and I've never worn a polyester blazer. I mean, honestly, in this day and age, sorry, my rant is horrific here.
Yeah, go for it.
When we think about what we're teaching the children about fast fashion and about responsible fashion, we're telling them to basically buy these horrible man-made fibres because they're cheap. Goodness knows where they're manufactured, by the way. And again, it's never going to get worn. It's going to get dumped in landfill or passed on down through the chain. And I just don't understand. It's not a life skill. You're not going to grow up, and yes, you might wear some sort of smarter attire, but for the most part, even as teachers, we don't dress. Take my husband, who loves a suit, don't get me wrong, but there are some teachers who love to wear a suit. But for me, I'm comfortable. I'm moving about. It's a job where you're physically on the move. So wearing like a skirt and tights and, all those things that we're expecting children to wear, it's not always practical. And I also think it's not practical for the children. It's not practical in the winter weather. I I just don't understand it. I wish we could but we couldn't get rid of it, because I know if we got rid of it, it would be an utter free for all, because we've never taught children how to dress appropriately, and you can see it. I don't know. Do you have a sixth form at your school?
We don't, no, but I have at previous schools, and they do for the most part kind of dress there, but there is the bit at the start where they are kind of pushing it and exploring and kind of like what to wear, what not to wear. But sometimes they'll come in and wear inappropriate things, and then they're a little bit embarrassed that they went for that, and then the next week they're kind of sorted.
Oh, and then they start wearing comfortable clothes, and I just think if we could do the same to children, I think they would learn to wear clothes that were comfortable, and I think parents wouldn't be caught in this horrific trap of buying something that they don't necessarily want to buy, that they can only afford to buy one of, by the way, because it's expensive. You know, like if you go to Primark, you can buy packs of t-shirts, you can buy hoodies, you can buy really comfortable clothes quite cheaply. You cannot buy a blazer cheaply unless you're buying it second hand. And I mean, like, it's just, to me, just doesn't make sense. And we're not. It's not. I'm sick of we're teaching them life skills. No, we're not. These are not life skills. These are. It's a mechanism of control. It's a mechanism of punishment.
Well, that's what I said when you. I was just reading it out, just in the point where you're sorting out your microphone. The actually in this Guardian article, the guy said it discusses about how this is kind of the last remaining thing that was put into place before corporal punishment was taken out, and the cane and stuff. And actually, this is kind of the one thing that's left from that kind of generation, because teaching's evolved so much generally since then. But this is that last bit of that power and that regiment that's kind of left.
And I feel particularly for children who are exploring their identity, who are not sure, perhaps on gender, sexuality. School uniform gives you absolutely no wiggle room. You stick out like a sore thumb if you have to, if you have to choose how you want to dress. There's no wiggle room. There's no ability to self-express there. And I think,
it's the other thing of teenage girls growing as well. Like, I remember at school being mortified of when my breast grew and I couldn't, buttons would pop open or gape and stuff. Like, it's not made for, like, they're not made for comfort.
No, I mean, a white blouse. Who in their right mind thought that was a sensible idea? I would never wear a white blouse. And I mean, I have the same. I don't want to let out my children, but like. We have this conversation about the type of, you have to wear a paddy bra underneath it, because there's no other way round about it.
Because they're very thin, aren't they?
They're very thin. So you're not even allowing the children to have a comfort of a choice of underwear, really, to a certain extent. I don't know, people love uniform, and I get it's simple. You get up, you put it on, and you walk out the door. But I think I'm starting to feel the older I get, the more I think it's so archaic and so ridiculous. I can't wrap my head around it. And they spend hours sending you as a parent all these guidelines about shoes and what to wear for PE and stuff like that. At the end of the day, we just want our girls to take part in sports, so does it really matter what they wear? I mean, but I think one of the biggest barriers, and there was this interesting, I don't know if you saw it. It was a Scottish thing. This just shows you. It was, I think it was in the STV, and it said something that was quite a high statistic in Edinburgh of children not going to school during the week on certain days because they only had one uniform and it wasn't clean.
Yeah.
And you just think that if you were allowed to wear your own clothes, you wouldn't have that issue. Sorry, my phone's sleeping. But you wouldn't have that issue. You would be able to you could be able to wear whatever you wanted comfortably, because you could buy 3 or 4 outfits that could last, a whole week, rather than having this one outfit that you only wear just to this place for 7 hours of the day.
And that was quite interesting, because I was researching school uniform, and the thing that I didn't expect to find was actually they did loads of tests on school uniform, and actually it's incredibly unhygienic because they wear it so often and don't really necessarily wash the blazers and stuff. They're like as unhygienic as like the underside of a toilet seat in terms of germs, and they're just actually, school uniform is so high in germs. And then when you think about it that way, no wonder these kids are always sick. And we think it's because of the school environment and they're passing it around, but actually probably the fact that they wear the same blazer day in, day out and don't change it is also contributing.
wipe their nose in their sleeves,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, we've all seen it at hand. But I want somebody to explain to me. I'm sure my husband, who is a deputy head teacher, by the way, will say that uniforms is important and it helps identity and all of those sort of things. Particularly the independent sector love that. They love that sense of identity with it. But they have a different system for uniform. Like they also have tons of it. Like if a child loses something, they've got absolutely whack loads that they can pull out of a bag and give to. So children don't have that sense of discomfort. They also, in the independent sector, have less of an issue about hand-me-downs. So a lot of children comfortably wear brothers, sisters, whatever, because everything's labelled, so you know that they're wearing their cousin Johnny who left 15 years ago is jumper, and they're okay with that. But I find within the state sector, children they don't want to be seen as poor, so therefore they want brand new. And
Yeah,
again, I
we've
think that
got
puts
we've got
pressure on
swap rails
parents.
at school this year that we've started, where we got old students to donate their uniform back, and actually I was really surprised by how much we still got, and that kids just aren't using it or aren't interested in it, that they all want their new items, and they're quite happy just to have one blazer. I'd rather have them one secondhand and one new one, so at least I can swap them and rotate them round.
Yeah, I mean the blazers. I mean, God love them. I've managed to get mine through the tumble dryer, which was once I worked out that I could do that, I was like, yes, this is a game changer. But I find that I can only have, as a working mum, you can only have really 2 sets of uniform in rotation to get through the wash, and it's a lot of stuff, and it's a lot of stuff to keep track of as well. Whose is whose, and I've only got 2 children, but there are people who've got like 4 children. I mean, how do you keep track of all that and make sure they've got the right stuff, the right shoe? And no, couldn't do it. I would
And
be
it's
really
same like
miserable.
with even the younger years. Like I think an Airtex is much better than a shirt, but all primary school teacher children basically have white Airtexes. I was like, I know from having a 6-year-old that is not going to stay white for very long at all. And it's like
No.
I remember somebody saying to me, it's like, oh, but they've got a mark on it. I was like, yeah, but it's clean. I've washed it. I'm not sending them to school in dirty stuff. They've got new. It's freshly washed and cleaned. It's just the fact that you got a stain on it painting on the very first day he wore it. But I'm
I
not going to go
know.
buy him new white uniform just because I can't get the stain out. But it's not like he's wearing dirty things.
I know. I once had a horror where I had to take a child to the dentist in the middle of the day and return them to school, and they'd got blood all down their white shirt, and I mean it was never coming out. I mean, you just think, why are we making children wear white? What is the logic of this? Yeah, and I quite often I do the whole thing when I've got little children and I'm sending their stuff home at the weekend. I always say, "Can you get your dad to put it in a nice cool wash?" Because I was thinking, why do we always tell children to give it to their mums to wash? I find that really irritating. So, no, give this to your dad. Take your games home to your dad. Give it to him to wash. And then you always get about 4 children. My dad doesn't know how to work the washing machine. That's not the point. Take it home. Give it to your dad. But
Tell him he
anyway,
needs to learn.
I know it's all about breaking down gender stereotypes, people. But the whole thing, I think this move, and I hate to invoke the Catherine Burble Singh lady, but I find this negative attitude towards children. Like children need to is teaching them obedience. That's what we're down to. We've lost control, so we're going to teach obedience, and we're going to teach them like Pavlov's dogs. We're going to teach them to walk in silence, come in, stand up when a member of staff comes in silence. And I just think in this uniform that's going to be pristine, when you think about no other situation apart from prisons, really do that. And you're like, wait a minute here, these are children, and we're thinking these children have mental health issues because of COVID. If anything, what we should be doing is creating a nurturing environment. We've got attendance issues coming out of our ears. And I genuinely think a lot of it is down to the fact that we have this real negative culture towards children, and it starts with the clothing and it works its way through. The teachers who survive are the ones who create the good relationships and who get kids. And I think we need more of that, developing relationships and looking at how to support children rather than how to beat them down from every single angle.
That's the thing. I'd much rather that our students have equipment and do equipment checks and make sure that they're ready to learn for the lessons. And then I always just stock them up anyway, if they don't, or make sure they've got their reading book and they're actually reading, and make sure they know how to use their planner and how to log their homeworks. Like, they're much more important life skills, like organisational skills, than being able to dress themselves.
Definitely. And dress themselves in something that they will never wear again in life. It's just, to me, it's
and that's
fascinating.
My school allowed for the first time this year that our students can wear black trainers, but they need to be like the leathery type ones because they've become quite fashionable. And it's not made a difference them wearing them. The only thing is that the girls said that they find them a bit annoying with wearing tights, so they wear tights and then socks and then their trainer shoes. But like, it's not made a difference what type of shoe they wear. And I asked some of my students earlier, I was like, what would you change about our uniform? And one guy went, I'd quite like to wear white socks every now and then. It's like the fact that I was like, I don't know whether that rule is purely some mother has gone, right, I'm not washing any more white socks so they don't stay clean. I'm banning them as school uniform. Yeah. But it does seem bizarre that like they can't even, like, even if you were in business, you'd wear like maybe some little fancy socks. That's how you show your yourself, but it's a little bit hidden.
I was thinking, if that's the one thing you would change about uniform, that's really quite. It just shows how we've trained them into, like, you must follow the rules. I find it fascinating. I also don't understand the clip-on tie. I understand the clip-on tie from the perspective of it makes everybody look the same, but it's not an item of clothing you're ever going to wear. It's not. Why are we wearing this? I mean. Yeah, and I don't understand why girls aren't allowed to wear cardigans, why they're forced into wearing a jumper or,
and the whole V-neck versus round neck, is that really going to make that much difference?
I know. I genuinely want to know what statistic is out there that shows that wearing uniform affects behaviour, because I can't see how it does, but I think.
Well, I have got some statistics for you. Do you want some?
I feel like you're going to tell me, but I don't feel like it's true. I feel like there's got to be some issue with the statistics.
Well, to be fair, this is an American document, but it does talk about kind of British schools. Where's the bit we've got? So it talks about kind of the average price of schools, and then it also says that because of the price and costing, that the Children's Society in the UK also found that 23% of parents have sent their children in ill-fitting, unclean or incorrect uniform because of the high cost of buying new ones. And I think everyone feels that towards the end of the school year, and it's like, you're growing, but you're going to grow more over the summer, so I'm not buying you anything now.
Yeah, no, I'm not buying you shoes because you only wear them to school. Why not have shoes that they could wear in lots of situations? Yeah.
And that's the thing I found quite shocking, that it's actually the primary schools that generally have the highest indices in their school uniform policy, with 23% of primary schools, 18% of middle schools, and then 10% of high schools. Whilst when it gets more relaxed, when students get older, that it appears that the dress code policies are often not necessarily or absent. So where they've kind of kept a bit of a dress code but relaxed it, that the children actually kind of more adhered to it than actually when it was stricter. So there is that part of it. Where's some of the other bits?
It's like you say about sixth form. I mean, there's a sort of every sixth form is slightly different, but if there is, a policy, it's there. But the children, they know what they're wearing. They know what they're wearing it for, and I don't know. I could go on about this for hours.
And then it also said that the having sports uniforms increases the participation in physical education. So apparently the relationship between school sports uniforms and participation, so that there was significant reduction in in activities among students who wore uniforms. So I think that means that like they're more likely
Yeah.
to kind of participate if they get to pick what kind of uniform they wear when they do their sports, which I
Clearly,
think
I'm not against PE uniform to a certain extent. I get PE uniform because that's you're part of a team and that's team identity, and I understand that. Because you need that. Obviously, if you're playing for a team, you need to wear the right kit. So therefore, I get it. But I like, for example, at the girls' school, they can wear any black leggings with their polo top, and some of them will wear shorts, and as long as they're wearing their polo top, yeah, then they'll still. Does it really matter? You just want them to take part. That's what you want. You just
exactly.
want.
And I've spoken to that on other shows, like getting especially girls to kind of connect with sport and kind of create something that it's not just this kind of playing netball and stuff, but there is more of a lifelong health benefit to it.
Yeah, yeah. I
So
just.
this says 72% of parents and 86% of school officials believe uniform minimises peer pressure, and that otherwise the students have a feel of the need to dress cool. And I think, but like you said, they have that aspect in the fact that they have their pencil cases and their bags. And when I spoke to some of my very wise-minded year 11s today, they said it would be much nicer if they could wear their own clothes, but it'd be nice if there was a policy that it was like they had to be unbranded. So therefore there was
Yeah.
no like, oh, that person's wearing that designer shirt, but other people can't afford it. But you could wear what you wanted, but it just had to be unbranded.
And I like the idea of like children actually having a say. I think that's incredibly important. And I think the thing that I find interesting about your last statistic was parents think that. And again, it's this lack of children having agency, lack of students having voice or saying what they think. Because I always, I mean, I grew up in an incredibly impoverished area, and you are aware of who has money and who doesn't. It doesn't matter what uniform you've got on. So it's peer pressure. Yes, there is peer pressure to fit in, but you already know there is already the hierarchy, unfortunately, there. Whether there's school uniform or whether there isn't school uniform. And that's the sad, horrible fact of life, and particularly with the widening gap that we're seeing. That, I mean, parents are put under huge amounts of pressure just to buy those particular black trainers, and I get that. But I think the whole cost of uniform as a whole is just it's it's not feasible, particularly where they've asked for specific branding. Like the school skirts, I believe, are £22. I should have looked this up. They range from £16 to £22, and you think if you're buying 3, 4 skirts and you've got 2 children for something that they're not and that they're going to grow out of quite quickly, it's not feasible. It just becomes a
It's
bit silly.
No, I've got on average the UK based on the Children's Society. They surveyed about 1,000 parents, and they found that parents spent on average about £337 a year for school uniform. So it is just an extortionate amount, and that's probably just at the start of the year. That's not topping them up and buying them new shoes when they've worn
No.
through and things like that.
No, exactly. And I just think, why are we doing it? What is the point? And they'll say it's so that they've got the school identity, the sense of pride that they go to that school. Now, children, they don't have pride over their school.
No.
That's an illogical. We have pride as teachers. We're very proud of our school. We want to say all the amazing things. And to a certain extent, there is a sense of pride, but it's not based on their school uniform. Um, and if anything, I've noticed school uniform is bizarre. It's bizarre colours as well. You really get a sense of a nice school uniform. You think, oh, that's a colour I would like to wear. You know, quite often it's really bizarre greens and golds, and you just think that's just no, it's horrid. I don't would never be seen. I mean, my school uniform, and I know Hannah, you probably have some terrible school uniform from your own school days. Mine was green and gold. I mean, who would want to be seen in that? No, thank you. But now I look and see my same school has gone to black and purple, and I think, oh, that's quite nice. But but they've got less adherence towards the jumper thing, and it just seems slightly less rigid. Where I'm from in Scotland, it just feels like we're very policey here. I don't know.
That's the thing. I had a green kilt at one school, and then I had a green and navy kilt at the second, and I quite liked the green and navy kilt. But then when I got to sixth form, we got to wear suits, but we could pick skirt suits or trouser suits, and I quite enjoyed that because I liked going and getting my pencil skirt suit, and I felt like proper businesswoman. But yeah, I probably only ever wear that now for interviews. And like you said about the tie, the only time people really wear ties these days are kind of weddings almost. So it's like, and my kids, they were like, they've got green ties, but then we have green blazers in lower school and black ones at Key Stage 4, so we can tell the difference. And they have different coloured ties depending on what year they are. But I can't remember what colour tie is what year. And but the year 11s were like, it'd be nice if we had black ties so they actually matched the blazer. Like, we don't even coordinate. But I don't think ties are necessarily relevant unless it was like, we've also got prefect ties, so it's like that they earn them and they've got that pride of kind of wearing them, I guess.
I think there's this need to follow what they look at the independent sector and they go, wow, they're doing really well. Let's follow what the independent sector does in terms of, like, they wear quite a rigid uniform. And actually, the reason the independent sector does well is nothing to do with uniform. It's completely down to class size. And
extracurricular activity options, because that's been proven to increase by at least one GCSE grade if they participate in outside sport and activities. They're not kind of aiming it at the right thing. But like this kind of links with what you said earlier. This was a study by TrueText. They found that 94% of UK teachers, it was only a sample of 180, so it wasn't that many, said that the school image is improved in the community when the kids wear school uniform. So I suppose there's that side of it that's a positive.
It's who are we trying to appease? We're trying to appease the elderly people in the street because we don't want to be seen to be teaching ruffians. It's nobody's addressing what children want or what children need, or the fact that they are in quite a physical environment, they're moving quite a lot, and like you say, they're wearing unhygienic clothing that's not fit for purpose. But it's all right because Auntie Anne in the street doesn't feel threatened when she sees somebody wearing a shirt and a tie compared to if she sees somebody wearing a hoodie. I mean, it's I just don't get it. I mean, I think we've got to stop appeasing that sort of culture and stop looking at children as if they're out to get us, because they're not. They're, you know as well as I do, that teenagers are absolutely marvellous and bonkers and they should be celebrated. And I just think we're beating them. But anyway, what was I going to say? I don't suppose you've just seen the wonderful Gillian Keegan has just banned mobile phones in schools.
Yes.
I know. I completely.
Well, it's still at headmaster discretion, apparently, but that's what they're suggesting people do now.
So again, I mean, we've all got, that's a completely different show, but I think what it does is it shows this need to control, and I find that again it's this need to be in charge. We're in charge of these children. Okay, can we just teach them, please? Can we just have the resources, the buildings, the enough teachers to actually teach them and spend less time looking, supporting multinational companies who produce school uniform, and actually stop policing them like they're horrible little things who, if they don't dress smartly, they will completely misbehave. The whole country will melt down. You know, I'm yet to find something positive about school uniform apart from it makes people feel better because children are smarter.
I agree. I think but it is one of those, like, do we say then if they do wear their own uniform that it's not hoodies, because that kind of hood up kind of can be seen as daunting in the community. But the upside, I have seen a thing following that thing about banning phones, is that one school did it, and they said that actually, and I think it was to do with their sixth form, they said actually they saw sixth formers sitting at break time actually talking and having conversation rather than all sat there on their phones and not sat with each other but not talking to each other. So I think there's a positive with that, but I don't see the positive of kind of keeping them trapped in that uniform.
Yeah, and like you say, when you went back to it, it's the last vestiges of corporal punishment. It's a mechanism to keep children, and I think it's such a minefield as a parent to sort of like navigate. And I just think that it's so archaic and so wrong. And I think what they did in the 90s when they brought in the polo shirts, you were probably just starting out doing your teacher's training, the polo shirts and the jumpers. And I'm thinking of one high school, I think, that still does it. Just Taverham High School, I think they still do it. Sorry if I just name checked them there.
No, that's fine. Yeah, they do.
And they'd still do it. But you still get the old lady in the street goes, oh, that doesn't look very smart. But in actual fact, it doesn't make any difference in the children.
No, because you don't need to tell them to tuck it in and stuff either. I quite like that.
And
I was at a certain school that D'Souza was in charge of, and they had they brought in really, really long kilts. So the idea was they were between the knee and the ankle, so that therefore kids couldn't roll them up. The kids did roll them up, and they became like massive kind of chunks around their waists. But it was very hard for them to get them above the knee. Just to get them to the knee, they had to roll them probably about 5 or 6 times. But I just think no matter what you do, there's the kids are always going to find a way around it.
Yeah, and we're exhausted. I just feel like we're exhausted and we're having to deal with it. And you should, honestly, I laugh every time I have to stop and help year 3 with a tie. I find that fascinating, and the independent sector that they still force these tiny little, and this is girls as well as boys, to wear a proper tie. Yes. And they can barely tie their own shoelaces, but yet they have to wear a tie. I just...
That's a really good point. I did find on Teacher Tap, they had a survey, I think it was a couple of years ago, but they asked, was there a uniform infraction by a student in your class today? And fee-paying teachers, there was only 42% said there was a uniform infraction, whereas in the most deprived schools, it was up to 71%. So you're like kind of 30% more likely to have a kid in having poor uniform if they come from a deprived background. But I guess that goes to the thing that they're not going to be as organised and supported in the morning and getting dressed and getting to school. And then if that kid gets to school and then they have that negative experience as soon as they get in, going, "Oh, your uniform's a mess," and it's going to set their day off in like a really negative way.
I find as well in the independent sector, you've got so many checks and balances before it. I mean, I'm not saying the parents are more supportive in many ways, more helpful in many ways. It's very much like you parent them because I'm paying you to a certain extent. And children will come in looking absolutely dishevelled, but the teacher will sort it out because they've got time, because they've only got 12 in their classroom. So they have time to help that child find whatever shoes they've lost or their blazer or whatever, and they can sort it out. And also, the uniform infractions and I think as well that even if the uniform's not spot on, it's not perceived in the independent sector to a certain extent, because I don't know, they all have that certain scruffiness about them that I don't know why, but they do. And they go, well, that's fine, they all look lovely. But at the end of the day, I don't think we go around beating them up, or not beating them up, but sending them to detention because their shirt isn't. I don't think I've ever done that in the independent sector. Ever given out, we call them demerits or strikes, for uniform.
So we have no excuses, so they don't count towards their kind of thing. But if they get 7 of them, then they get a detention. So they've got kind of 7 chances to kind of make sure that they kind of get it right. But it is that thing, like the fact that so many schools were kind of in the news. I know that teacher bashing in the news is quite a popular hobby of the media, but there were so many of women's or mums or dads standing with their kids and being like, my child was sent home because they had the wrong shoes on, or they were sent home because they had one too many piercings, or they were sent home because their hair was the wrong colour. I was like, I just don't know how that benefits that child. I get that they really want to hammer home their message and get it correct, but at what detriment? Because that kid is gonna associate school in a really negative way.
And you know that what's happened at the start of the term is in inset, we've all sat down, we've all been told, right guys, we're going to hit this policy really hard at the start of term. So immediately it's like, it's when you're refreshed, it's like and it's the SLT, they're out there, they're on patrol and they're like hitting these kids hard and sending them home. 3 weeks later, they're not caring. But the first week, because they're all over it like glue. I also don't have a huge amount of sympathy for the parents in that situation.
No.
Really controversial here, but you know the rules. I mean, I know the rules. The rules are sent to you. They keep sending them to you, whether you like them, whether you don't like them. And I've said I don't like them, but I will follow them. I will do whatever anybody tells me to do. I will question it if I'm sitting in a meeting. I will say, what's the benefit of this and what's it been proven? But at the same time, I don't support those parents who deliberately buy the Vivienne Westwood shoes and send your children into school, knowing that they'll get sent home.
That's the thing, and it's the knowing that they're not allowed nose studs, but then they get their nose pierced like the week before they go back. And I do kind of understand the health and safety aspect of that, especially if it's the nose, like in respects of and hoop earrings. They're more likely to get caught in the fact they are going to be playing payee. They are walking through corridors that at some points can have like 500 kids passing through them within half an hour, and there's balls and things being thrown around in playgrounds that are not necessarily the biggest of spaces. So I do understand from a health and safety point of view that aspect is probably not, and especially with the fact that kind of school violence is kind of on the rise, and the idea that having split up girls fighting and what have you, and they pull hair and they go for each other's faces, like that is kind of an area that could easily go wrong if they're wearing those. But again, it is their responsibility. If they're choosing to do that, they've got to know the consequences. It's no different from walking through a street in London with all the hustle and bustle. But I guess that it's like, is it our duty of care that we need to make sure that they're doing those kind of things properly?
Yeah. And I mean, I always, like you said before, they will always find the way to push the boundary. And you know that what generally happens is we start off with this big uniform keg, and then we'll start getting told, now the girls' makeup, we need to do something about the girls' makeup. And you think, really? Okay, if they want to glue stuff to their faces, like eyelashes, and paint their eyebrows funny colours, we're not really giving them any way to self-express. So can we not just let them express themselves? Plus, they've got to make mistakes somehow, but we don't seem to be comfortable with letting children make decisions. And we want to. I feel like we want to control them. It's this obediency, and I think we've forgotten how to bring children into the conversation, or students into the conversation, young adults into the conversation. Say, look, what works for you? How could we do this better? You know, how can we teach better? I think a negative culture of teaching where we're constantly having to police uniform is not conducive to a learning environment. I think we need to look at much more positive reinforcement of behaviours rather than negative. I think we have to move away from this culture of permanently beating down children, particularly with mental health issues and attendance. We need to make schools places, inviting spaces where children want to come, not negative spaces where they feel like they're going to be criticised the minute they walk through the door. I would hate to go to one of these schools. I would have been the child that absolutely chafed against the rules at one of these schools and I actually left a job, as you know, at a school where I just saw the way it was going, and I thought, nope, this is not for me. It's not how I want to teach. I don't want to teach in a school where children walk along the corridors in silence and they have to be silent until they do a certain task, or they have to be show deference and respect towards teachers if, without it being earned by the teachers. I don't like the use of, we don't in Scotland as well, we don't use the word, we don't call men sir. Naturally, the first time when I had started teaching down here in 2004, 2005, the first time I started teaching down here, and I heard a child refer to a male teacher as sir. I was just like, what? Where are we? This is so archaic. We don't call them sir, we call them by their full names. And I generally found in any school that I taught in Scotland, it was you were referred to by your full name. And that was the respectful title. I find that deference is expected rather than earned. But that's just me.
It is that the students need to kind of build those relationships and kind of understand you. And I think us having this negative kind of start to every day or every tutor time, then it is going to put barriers in the way, and it's going to create barriers where they're not going to tell us what's going on and their mental health issues, and they're not going to tell us when we need support because they're not going to kind of let us in. I'm just going to play on the news, and then we'll find out what's going on in the world of education this week, and then we'll continue on with our chat if you're right to hang around for a bit longer.
If you still want me.
Of course.
Teaching is a rewarding profession, but it comes with its fair share of challenges. That's where ADAPT come in. We're not your typical trade union, but instead a modern, apolitical alternative, offering expert legal, employment and mental health support. Protection without the politics. So what makes ADAPT different? We're always apolitical and independent, specialised solely in supporting individual teachers. Our caseworkers are professionally qualified, ensuring you always get the best advice. Plus, there's 24/7 mental health support. Whether it's a simple contract check or handling serious allegations, ADAPT are here for you. Join the thousands of educators who've chosen ADAPT to protect their careers. Subscribe at adapt.org.uk today. ADAPT. Supporting school staff. Protecting careers.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and this is Teachers Talk Radio News.
The BBC covers reports that Labour has dropped plans to end charitable status for private schools. The status exempts some private schools in England and Wales from taxes. The Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, had previously said charitable status for private schools could not be justified. The party said it will still remove other tax breaks if it wins the next general election. There are around 2,500 private schools in England and Wales, and government figures show around half are registered as charities. Having charitable status means the schools cannot operate for profit and are eligible to claim some tax exemptions, including on donations and business rates. Since 2006, private schools have had to demonstrate they are creating public benefit in order to maintain their charitable status. Labour has said it would charge private schools 20% VAT and end business rates relief. It says this could raise an estimated £1.7 billion. A party spokesperson said the money would fund desperately needed teachers and mental health counselling in every secondary school. Last year, the Scottish Government scrapped business rate relief for private schools. The Conservatives have questioned whether tax changes would raise the £1.7 billion, as claimed by Labour. The problem of RAAC was highlighted again as parents with children at a secondary school in Durham, affected by the potentially unsafe concrete, staged a protest. Parents told Schools Minister Baroness Barron, who was visiting the school, that there had to be more support for the teachers and pupils and that the school must be rebuilt. The school is using a mix of face-to-face and online teaching after RAAC was found shortly before the return to school from the summer break. The Multi-Academy Trust, in charge of the school, has asked the DfE if it could use centre-assessed grades for GCSE and A-level pupils, similar to the way assessment was used during the pandemic. A DFE spokesman said it was working to bring back face-to-face teaching quickly and that the school would be rebuilt. Procurement, design and planning stages would be started before the end of the year. Schools Week reports on MPs' comments that government should create a school absence code specifically for mental health and review the adequacy of health services struggling with soaring waiting lists. The Parliamentary Education Committee has also urged the government to make its daily attendance data collection mandatory as soon as possible. The committee found growing demand for mental health services and special educational needs support, as well as the cost of living pressures and other issues, have compounded problems with attendance. However, Schools Minister Nick Gibbs said changes would add further complications for schools in coding absence, which could damage the accuracy of data. Full details of the committee's recommendations can be found in the article in Schools Week online. The Guardian covers news that in America, students at more than 50 high schools across the country are proposing a Green New Deal for schools. They are demanding that their districts teach climate justice, create pathways to green jobs, and plan for climate disasters. The campaign is seen as a reaction to right-wing efforts to ban or suppress climate education and activism at school. The national effort would see teach-ins, walkouts and petitions. The New Deal also calls for updated buildings and infrastructure to make schools more climate resilient. Further details can be found on the Guardian website. Finally, the Nuffield Trust has said that student loans in England should be written off for certain health staff once they have completed 10 years of NHS service. It says this is needed to stop a dropout crisis among nurses, midwives and other frontline staff. Ministers have rejected the idea, saying support is already in place and that the current student finance system strikes the right balance between the interests of students and taxpayers, as well as highlighting training grants, support for childcare and some expenses. Tuition fees are not charged in Scotland, and in Wales, tuition fees are covered if nurses and other frontline staff work for the NHS for 2 years. This has been your Teachers Talk Radio News with Jo Fox.
And I'm just looking through some of the pros and cons to uniform. So we've been through a few of these. So it builds school uniform, school spirit is one. Another is that it says that there's less bullying in school. But actually, there's a report in America. The grant, it was done quite a while ago, between 1993 and 95, that the introduction of school uniform doesn't necessarily mean that there's less bullying, and it's just down to the way that teachers consider that it does. But there's not much data in terms of the opposite, and I think as you said, unless you have like one of those bigger studies and actually we look at kind of Germany and I believe Spain, and there's a couple of other countries that don't have uniforms, that they can't be having a higher amount of bullying from not having uniforms. Otherwise, they would have brought back uniforms or put uniforms in. And that actually sometimes in terms of kind of you can see the differences in terms of uniforms not washed or being unkept, regardless of whether they're wearing uniform or not. And actually, school uniforms increase the average number of assaults by about 14 per year in certain schools in America, where they looked at the different versions. So I think that's just the perception, isn't it? That uniform stops bullying, but actually you can still tell whether people are trying to identify differently or what their background is and what their home life is like. You can still see that even in their uniforms.
I also, from growing up in an area where religious issues were rife, so growing up in the west coast of Scotland, where sectarianism is actually a very big issue in secondary schools, and still children are segregated based on faith. So, for example, my local primary school, I went to a non-denominational primary school, but across the road was the Roman Catholic primary school. And again, you are clearly segregating and identifying those children based on their school uniform. And I do wonder, you create almost it can be a negative tribalism with the school uniform, and you can also create a slight gang mentality culture with having uniforms. So saying that it's it can create foster community spirit. I don't think in that circumstance of where sectarianism. Now I know they've done a lot on this, and it's certainly much less of an issue as it was growing up. But I think that it can create division in neighbourhoods where children have gang culture. Then be aware which school that you actually go to. So I don't see how that works. I think what we're saying here, Hannah, is that we should be paid to do a huge study on the
Me and you will take it on.
Yeah, we'll just take it on. We'll just go out there and actually, because I think that it's so easy to have no data on it and therefore prop the system up. Than actually go out there and I think that's a sad indictment in educational data, is the fact that education now is not something that people go educational sort of theory or whatever at university level. It's poorly funded, and we don't have enough research out there, particularly within our own educational system, and we're constantly getting initiatives and ideas pushed our way that we don't necessarily agree with or are well thought out or are actually researched to a high degree. And I think that behavioural policy, uniform policy are two areas where we're just expected to put up with it and say, well, no, this is the way we're going. You think, well, what's the research? What backs this up? Particularly from my point of view as a scientist, I disagree with it fundamentally, but I also disagree with it from a mathematical point of view. Where's the evidence? What is there to support this archaic system other than adults like it?
It is that, and I suppose there is that sense that those being spotted by uniform can work both ways. I have a friend that their son was spotted shoplifting in a shop, and they recognised his school uniform on the CCTV, so they phoned the school and told the school, and they called the parents, and the parents had to go in, and they were like, he's been caught doing this. It was only just, I think it was like some football cards or something, and then actually they went in and watched the security footage and showed him of it, and he had like a little bit of a slap on the wrist, but nothing was done about it. But it is that we can, the kind of antisocial behaviour outside of school can be spotted, but then also their antisocial behaviour is then subjected and put onto the school that they're not good at. We're like, it's not our responsibility what they're like outside of school, but it's still deemed publicly, if they're done it in the school uniform, that that's somehow our responsibility.
I know, and as we come up to the time of Halloween, as all schools then send the message out to children saying, you must, it's Halloween, you really must not bring the school in to distribute, as if we're in local parentis. I mean, I find that find it all very odd how we're you've probably spoken about this a lot, but I mean, it's the abdication of parental responsibility and parenting through the state, which, because parents are tired, they work hard, and they're having to work hard because they're having to make ends meet. Schools are having to plug this very definite gap that's been set up in the system, and children are already set up to fail. And I just feel that uniform is such a stick to beat everybody with. And there's such bigger things. We need to be looking at literacy. Rates. We need to be looking at. I genuinely think we need to be looking at children's mental health. I think it's a time bomb ticking. And attendance. This idea that if we all drive round and collect them and bring them into school, that's going to make it better. The reason why they don't want to be in school, can we actually look at the reasons why children don't want to be in school? The curriculum's not fit for purpose. The fact that there's no special schools, not enough special school places, so we're putting children into quite harmful situations that they shouldn't necessarily be in. So you've got children with autism autistic spectrum disorders having to navigate a mainstream system with very little support. And it's could you imagine being in a high school of 1,700 pupils, and constantly, particularly if you have a spectrum disorder, constantly being told about uniform or how to walk, or it's an incredibly stressful, high stress environment with lots of very negative rules and consequences. And I just think that's not what education should be about. Education should be about creating an environment where children want to learn, that they can be creative, they will learn to give back to society. And it wasn't the reason why I got into teaching, and it's like I say, I've taught in many different. I've taught in from a perspective point of view, I've taught in a secure unit, and this is going way back when, and we certainly didn't have uniform in a secure unit. And the behaviour was not dictated by what the children wore. I can tell you that. It certainly was not about what the children wore that dictated their behaviour or their sense of belongingness. I mean, it was many other factors.
That's the thing, it's their ability to be able to deal with situations and build resilience in them is far more important than getting them to wear the right colour uniform. And I think it's I will say that my I did interview my tutor group, and I was like, ask them a little bit about their uniform. One student did say that they felt quite swanky in their uniform, and they were like, you must say that. But a lot of them said, like, they actually said that the best part of their uniform, it's so hit and miss as well. Some of them said the best part of their uniform was their blazers, where others were like, they don't like the big shoulder pads. And actually, when we buy stuff, you're not really going to find kind of big shoulder pads in high street shops. That isn't what normal people wear. We don't go out in these big kind of suits.
We don't dress like we're in the 80s, if we're Joan Collins marching through Dynasty. No, we don't. And we also don't wear polyester like it goes out of style. I mean, has anybody done any sort of flammability tests on any of this stuff? I mean, it's like, you laugh, but you do wonder, like, in terms of, I suppose, yeah, they must have done. But anyway, the polyester, if anybody has never felt a school uniform, I'm not advising you accost a child in the street and stroke them, but what I am saying is, if you ever get the opportunity to actually feel the blazers, it's the most bizarre, like, shiny material. And then you have the problem of jackets. I mean, oh my gosh, the problem when we get into winter, jacket debacle, and that gets debated in the staff room, and you're sitting there in the staff room going, please, can we not talk about coats? I'm not interested in coats. Please stop it. So the children they will try to get as designery a coat as possible that they can shove over the top of a blazer and tuck the blazer up, and because they still have to wear their blazers, they will tuck that blazer up and into like a little crushable ball underneath the jacket, and you just think, this is insanity. That cannot be comfortable. But no, they and I am equally as bereft as all parents when the children come home and they say they must have a North Face jacket.
Yes, my friend had that. Her son wanted a North Face. They're like £300 or something.
I know,
it's insane.
And I'm also seriously gutted because about 10 years ago they were you could pick them up like in any sporting goods shop for a reasonably cheap price. And I actually own a couple of North Face jackets from about 10 years ago when they weren't fashionable. I find it really bizarre. But they're like so expensive, and you just think this would not get so out of control if it was the only way that children could express themselves is through their coats and their shoes and their bags. So they have to be wearing the most expensive item they can get hold of, and we have to we're prisoners to it. I find it all, but anyway, so I am guilty of having bought North Face jackets, but not the really expensive ones.
But it's like you said when you said about the blazers, that I've got a child in my tutor group that has really struggled now that he's moved into year 10 and got a new jacket, that it's just really stiff and really uncomfortable, and it's set off because he's got other learning needs, but it's set off all his sensories and he cannot wear it. It just makes him really uncomfortable. And I just don't think we even think about that kind of side of how uncomfortable a uniform is.
If you have autistic spectrum disorders, or even not even, of course that's awful, but if you have ADHD or anything where you have a sensory, you're hyper aware of the texture of materials, yet you're forced into wearing some non-wicking polyester stiff material, particularly with a collar. I've seen children who you can tell they just look uncomfortable from the moment they come in to the moment they leave. And it's you if you know that if you could put something soft on them, they would be immediately happy. Um, and I have a child who's like that. Not identified as having any disorders, but certainly needs to wear soft clothing at all times, and would not choose ever to wear a school uniform if they could. But yeah,
One of the other
do you
cons
know?
is obviously that it teaches gender norms, that there is a boys and a girls uniform. Obviously, like trousers have come in, but that we did see it a lot in the summer where I think there was we had at our school, we had one boy protest and wore a girl's skirt, and actually our kids did it the right way. They did student voice and they created a survey and they got everyone to vote, and then because they wanted shorts for boys, because previously boys weren't allowed to wear shorts in summer, and actually the school allowed it, and now the boys are allowed to wear shorts, which is just perfectly normal and acceptable. But I do think there is that side of it, that it's this is what boys wear and this is what girls wear,
Exactly.
and there isn't that kind of, obviously there's the trousers, but there's not really a lot of place for them to express themselves
And
without getting
look at
told
where we
off.
are just now with the government refusing or being dragging its heels to give schools any sort of guidance on children who are having gender identity issues, or who need support. And this is what it is: children need support navigating the hideousness of childhood as is. And we are really detrimentally not helping these children by having these strict draconian sort of rules about you must conform to either being a boy or girl, you must wear a boy or girl's uniform. And I had this problem with my child. This was previously, and she was in an independent school, and she wanted to wear trousers, and they were no they weren't they said, how did they put it? It was a really clever way of phrasing it, but it was along the lines of, you must choose a uniform and adhere to it. So you must choose a boy's uniform or a girl's uniform, and you must stick to it, which makes absolutely no sense, because you're not saying you want to wear one uniform or the other. What she wanted to do was to wear trousers, but in the summer wear a summer dress. But that was seen as picking and choosing uniforms. And I thought, that's clever. What you've done is you've made it so they can't choose to wear trousers. They've since changed that rule, but at the time I thought, genius, you're trying to find loopholes around that sort of way of making children conform into a particular standard. But I think that this idea that boys must wear trousers even in sweltering heats. And you saw that the start of term, children were really hot, having to wear jumpers and blazers in classrooms because it was a school uniform policy. And we're looking at through climate change, and we're seeing the temperatures soar, to astronomical, up to 40 degrees, but yet we still expect them to wear school uniform. And you would be wearing linens and cottons, but no, we're making children wear polyester and synthetic materials that you can't sweat through, and say, but it's a uniform and you must wear it because that's the rules, and we have rules. And you're like, but why do you have rules? These rules make no sense. Yeah.
It is that, and I've got so this stat is, I find, quite interesting. So 7 in 10 UK students believe that school uniform helps them to fit in, but it's quite interesting that it actually decreases as they get older. So 6 to 7 year olds, 75% think that their uniform helps them fit in. 11-year-olds, it drops to 60% think their uniform helps them fit in. And when they hit 14, it drops to 57% think that their uniform helps you fit in. And it's almost one of those, like when they're at nursery, we send them all to nursery in their own clothes because we have special nursery clothes so that they get ruined and it doesn't matter. But it's quite interesting that actually kind of we then put them in school uniform to go to school, and we have these beautiful pictures on our front doorsteps and stuff, which is lovely. But actually, kind of the older they get, the less that actually it helps them fit in.
I think we're just taking away that sense of identity. And like I say, like there is shown in schools, for example, schools in Germany, that children know how to dress for the weather. They know how to dress appropriately. They know the difference between formal and informal attire. But we never give the children to flex those muscles to explore. And I think the first time they actually, apart from nursery, the first time they get to explore their own identity is when they hit sixth form. And like you say, the wheels come off for that first couple of weeks until they go, do you know what, I'm a wee bit cold in that. I think I'll wear, something a bit more comfortable, and they slide back into joggers and they actually start to look like they've just rolled out in their pyjamas by the end of it, which is like quite pleasing. You're thinking, oh, why can't I dress like that? And I don't know if has your school ever brought in any policy for staff as well?
We've got policy, but it's not overly rigid compared to other schools that I've been at, where it has to be like people have been told about what they're wearing. I think the main one is the kind of closed toe shoes for safety. But I have been at schools where people have said, "Oh, your dresses aren't long enough," not to me, but to other people, and or commented on it. But again, I think it's nice to see different teachers expressing, and it's that whole idea, isn't it, that some policies have like you have to have tattoos covered up and things like that. Mm-hmm. But actually, we live in a society where like having their teacher cover that up isn't going to. They're going to see it on YouTube and Instagram and all these other places. Like we're not hiding anything from them. Like I feel like we need to be more normal to students, that we're not this kind of almost like police role above them, that actually we are just people like them, and we're essentially more second parents to them, and we want them to do well, and we care for them, and we're a safe space, as opposed to being this authority figure that like dictates everything down to them.
We've almost got there is a policy in place at school, and it does state that we have to dress, in formal attire. We have to dress, and men are expected. It doesn't say it in it, but it is an unwritten code that men are expected to wear ties, which I think is utterly ludicrous. I mean, what is the point of ties? Have you ever looked at where ties point? It's really inappropriate. They shouldn't be wearing them at all. Yeah. But I mean, the men are expected to wear ties, and there's also a weirdly unwritten sort of policy that it's sort of hushed about and sort of said, like in inset days, we're expected to dress quite smartly in inset days, just in case parents turn up, because woe-betide a parent sees you looking, a bit like a burst cushion. But I think I dress very smart for school anyway. But that's more about it's more about I dress smartly, but I dress comfortably. So I always wear a flat shoe. When I was younger, I would wear a high heel shoe. I mean, like, what was I thinking running about in high heels teaching? But I did. I wore like sky high heels and and short skirts, and whatever made me feel like feel good to get the job done. And nowadays, I suppose I'm much more comfortable. I'm jealous of people who get to wear trainers to work. I would love.
Yeah, I'm jealous of the PE department. I mean, I do wear, prior to breaking both my feet, I did wear heel boots, and because I like the height over the teenage boys that I teach, and I like the clippity-cloppity noise that it makes behind kids that makes them kind of work without me having to say something. But I know a friend that's gone into senior leadership, and they've been told that they have to wear smart. They should look better than everyone else because they're SLT, and the fact they had open evening, I think they were in heels for like 12 hours and were like, my feet are dead. I was like, that's just not necessary.
Torture chambers. No, you shouldn't have to wear heels for anything nowadays. I'm 46 years old. I refuse to wear high heels even now for an event. But I would love to be able to wear trainers, and I just think is anybody actually physically? I would love to see somebody do like one of those like road maps of what you do in a day, like put like a GPS tracker on you,
Yes.
and then like follow like a little zigzaggy line to see how much you move in a day, and say like, clearly this is a very physical job. You should be really wearing leggings and t-shirt and a comfy top, rather than when you think about what we're kind of expected to wear, and so we all do it because we're nice hairy animals. So we all wear a nice dress, because I like a dress. Wear a dress. And who invented tights? What is that? Is criminal. That's
I have that debate with my
bad.
tutors. They're like,
I haven't
hate
even
tights.
got to tights
Nope.
yet. I mean, I'm so glad the weather stayed warm and it's played ball. I'm not going near tights. I don't understand them. But yeah, I just think, could we all just as a society just go, do you know what? We've had COVID. We liked being at home in comfy clothes. Can we not just all have comfy clothes now? They're nice. You know,
I felt really naughty wearing leggings because I was in my boot for so long, and I wore leggings for ages to work with, and I made sure I wore like kind of quite big jumper dresses over the top so nothing was seen, but I couldn't wear like jeans and stuff because if I wore the boot all day they would dig in like where the seams were. But I just felt like I was really letting myself down, and I must have looked like a shambles. I think we just put so much expectations, but then I'm like, I would fit in well all right with the PE department, so why am I making myself feel like this?
Oh, I know. I mean, the one day I think last year I wore like a navy trouser that could have looked a bit denim like, but it wasn't. It was a navy trouser, gold buttons up the side, a nice wee pair of tan boots. I thought I was nailing it. Somebody said to me, they said, "Oh, you look different today. You're a little bit casual." And I was like, "Oh, thought I looked quite smart." And then you kind of think, "Oh, am I casual? Can I be casual?" So it's bizarre. We all have to navigate this. We're not teaching children how to do this, how to navigate the society of what, like how to deal with what is a casual, formal, or whatever setting. Because we are still navigating it as adults, and we still don't really know what the rules are, and we're hoping we're getting it right. I mean, God forbid, a man felt uncomfortable because our skirt or our dress length was not quite correct for them. I'm mind boggles with that one. I used to get that all the time when I was a young teacher, not nowadays, obviously. But in my 20s, I remember getting taken aside. Actually, I remember getting taken aside in my teaching practice and being told, I get told two major things. I'll tell you another story in a minute. But told, oh, that skirt is a little bit, it's a bit, makes men feel a bit uncomfortable. God forbid the men feel uncomfortable. And what about the boys? Well, the boys shouldn't be looking at me like that, but but what can you do? That's their choice, that's their decision, not mine. Why am I being shamed?
The boys are going to see much worse online than what we're wearing.
I know. Anyway, when I started teaching, this is again ages ago. We had something called a regent in the school, and the regent was the person who was responsible for the student teachers. And she took us into the office, and she was ex-military, and she said, and this was only in 2000, she said, now in some schools, women wear trousers, and that's fine in those schools, but at this school, women do not wear trousers. I was just like, what?
That's crazy.
2000. You can't. Sorry, I can't wear a trouser. I have to wear a skirt to work. And and I laugh about that now, but we do that to children. We're making them wear skirts. It's just, and if that's not your default setting, if you're not comfortable wearing skirts, and the first thing we do then is the girls then will be like, well, I don't want to wear skirts, I want to wear trousers, so I'll wear really skinny trousers. Well, that
yes.
Then, oh my goodness, then that's like, oh, well, let's all have a meeting about the trousers that girls are wearing now. Can we not have a meeting about jackets, trousers, socks, anything, shoes? I'm not interested in what they're wearing. Can I just get them in my class? Can you just get them in there? That's what I'm interested in.
And I find this stat quite interesting, that 89% of teachers believe that uniform reduces bullying. 61% of parents believe uniform reduces bullying, but students, only 50% believe that uniform reduces bullying. And they're the ones that are going to know. We're always like asking the teachers, and we're like, yeah, yes, good uniform, that's going to prevent bullying in our school. And it's like, but actually, does it? And we're not really necessarily listening to the student voice. I think we quite, and rightly so, we do listen to the teacher voice. I think quite often we have a lot of these educational kind of advisors that don't actually kind of have much education experience kind of being involved in policies. But actually we need more kind of student kind of guidance, because the world is changing, and like you said, from what it was from when I started teaching to now, teaching is very, very different, and the classroom is very different now to when I was in the classroom, and we are out of touch with what it's like to be children in today's world, with so much exposure to different online social media and platforms and things. And we need to kind of think about how we need to change education to adapt to it. I do think kind of uniform is that next step. It certainly needs to be adjusted, that it's not these see-through, poorly fitted shirts, or these uncomfortable kind of blazers that are actually covered in germs, or kind of too tight and uncomfortable kind of scenarios. We need to produce something and change uniforms so it is comfy and nice and wearable. Not something, we don't need ties, because they're never going to need to wear a tie unless they get to a wedding. But we need to make it and adapt it to suit now and this generation.
I feel as well that as teachers, again, you've been teaching for a fair few years, is that we're not in the workplace. So we're in our workplace, but not what is the workplace. So we don't genuinely have a good feel for what children are going to do in the future from that point of view. And I think there also needs to be... Oops.
Apologies, sorry, that went too early. Everything's going off, my phone's going off. It's because we're hit 7:30. We've been chatting too much. You finished your sentence. I do apologise.
I was going to say maybe we should bring in businesses as well. What do they need? What's the uniform of the future?
What do they want to see people wearing?
I don't think it's shoulder pads.
It's not shoulder pads. It's not shoulder pads is the answer.
Please get rid of the shoulder pads.
Well, thank you. Apologies for that. I was like, I just went to get the mouse in the right place and it accidentally clicked. So apologies. But we have chatted for well over an hour and a half. And thank you for joining me and giving me your lovely views. Tell Ross I'm coming for him next.
Oh, he's dull. He's such a deputy head. He'll just be like, no, follow the rules.
Maybe I can convert him to changing. That's the thing. He wants to bring back Latin, so it says a lot.
Yeah, it does actually. It does.
Well, have a lovely evening, and thank you for joining me on this lovely Monday evening.
No, thank you, Hannah. It's been a pleasure. Cheerio.
Bye.
Bye.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.